So inside the post list, we're going to mark this file as use client, and we're going to be importing one thing. We're going to import the postcard from /post-card. Now we need to create this component. So inside the posts, new file post-card.jsx, and then you can say rft, and then change this into postcard. And the reason for this postcard is we're going to be heavily reusing it in the other pages, so it is better to just create it right away. Now the post list takes in a couple of props: the posts, the current user, and the on post update. And then we're going to say this: we are going to check if there are no posts, or the posts.length is equal to 0. So if that is true, then we're going to return this div here. We're going to return a div with a class name of party on the y of 8, and then text-center, and then text gray-500, and then on dark mode text gray-400. Close that out, and then inside this div we're going to have a paragraph that says no tweets yet, be the first to tweet. Now for the div, our return, we're going to return a div inside here, and we're going to map over our posts. So posts.map, and then for every post that we get back, then we're going to return the postcard component like so, with a key of post._id, and then the post is going to be equal to the post, and then the current user is going to be equal to the current user, and on post update is going to be equal to on post update. So you can save that, and we should now be able to see something on the screen because we added a tweet beforehand. So once it reloads, oh, it has already reloaded. As you can see, we have one tweet right there. But I want to go ahead and delete this. So let me delete it from the database so that we can see the empty state of our application. And there we go. So that is the empty state that says no tweets, be the first to tweet, which is basically this right here. Now let's jump into the postcard so that we can begin to build this out. Now the postcard is one of the biggest components, so we are about to do quite a bit of typing. I think I like the desktop version mode. I don't like the mobile version. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but I just don't like it. Okay, so we're going to do the following. Inside postcard, we're going to destructure the props. So post, and then current user, and then on post update. And then we're going to have quite a number of state values. So const liked and set liked. This is going to be equal to useState. By default, it is going to be false, and I'm auto importing them. So let me copy this 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. This next one is going to say retweeted and set retweeted. By default, it is going to be false. And then next is bookmarks, so set bookmarked and bookmarked. And then next is delete dialog open, and then set delete dialog open. So that is going to be our toggle for the dialog. And then next we have set share dialog open, and then share dialog open. And then next is set reply open, and then reply open. And then next is set loading, and then loading. And all of these are false, by the way, and we need an extra one inside here, which is reply content, and set reply content, and this is going to be an empty string. And then we need to have reply loading, so reply loading and set reply loading. This is going to be equal to useState, and it is going to be false by default. And then we don't need these two, but inside here we're going to say const convex is equal to use convex from convex react, and then const router is equal to use router from next navigation. And then we're going to have our function here that says use effect. So use effect, enter to auto import it, and the use effect is going to take in a dependency array of current user as well as the post, and then we're going to say if current user exists and post also exists, then we're going to call a function called check interactions, and then we're going to create that function next. So const check interactions is going to be an asynchronous function where we're going to check if there's no current user, then we want to simply return. Otherwise, we're going to have a try catch block here. So try catch block, and for the catch block, we're going to say console.error, and we're going to say error checking interactions, and then we're going to pass in the error.message, and then the toast.error is going to be as follows. Auto import this. There we go. We're going to say error checking interactions, and then for our try block, we're going to do the following. We're going to use array destructuring once again. So const is liked and is retweeted, and is bookmarked is going to be equal to await promise dot all. Open this up and then square brackets. We're going to say convex.query passing api.posts.is post liked, then comma, this is going to take in the user ID, and then current user dot underscore ID, and then the post ID is going to be post dot underscore ID, and then we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to close this, and then we're going to copy this, paste it down. Now this next one is going to say api.post.is retweeted, and it's going to take in the user ID as that, and then the post ID as that, and then finally the third one, which is now going to populate this, is going to say convex.query.is bookmarked, like so, and then takes in the user ID as current user underscore ID, and that as well, and then this closes here, where we can now say set liked into is liked, and then set retweeted, and this should be set is retweeted. What did I call it? Retweeted and set retweeted. Okay, yeah, okay, that's okay. So set retweeted into is retweeted, which is the value that we're getting back from here, and then set bookmarked into is bookmarked, like so. Now we don't have these functions yet, so this one and this one and this one, but we are going to create them. So before we do, let's just continue building this out. So we're going to have another function called format time. Const format time is equal to passing the timestamp, and then we're going to say return format distance to now, and this is a function that is coming from datefns, and we're going to pass in the new date and pass in the timestamp, and then comma, and we're going to say add suffix and set this to true, so that it shows like 1 day ago or 2 days ago or 3 hours ago. So let's import this because it was not giving me the option to auto import it for some distance for some reason. So I'm going to say import format distance to now, from date-fns, which we already installed at the beginning of this project. Now next, we're going to create our handle like function. So const handle like is going to be equal to an asynchronous function, and we want to check if there is no current user, then we want to return. Otherwise, we're going to have a try catch block. For the try block, we're going to say await convex dot mutation, and then pass in the api dot posts dot like post, which we don't yet have, and then we're going to pass in the user ID as the current user dot underscore ID, and then the post ID is going to be the post dot underscore ID, and then we're going to say set liked into the opposite of liked. So if it is true, then set it to false. If it is false, then set it to true. And then we're going to call on post update question mark dot, and then call the function to update the post. And then we're going to say toast.success, and we're going to say tweet liked. So, and then for the error, we're going to say toast.error failed to like post, just like that. And the next function is called handle retweet. So const handle retweet is going to be an asynchronous function. We're going to check if there is no current user. You can see it's a bit of a pattern. Then we're going to return. Otherwise, we're going to have a try catch block. And for the try block, we're going to have the following. And you know what? Let me just copy this because it is simpler. So await convex mutation, and want to check for the retweet post function. The user ID current user.id, and then post ID is that. And then we're going to say set retweeted into the opposite of retweeted. And then we're going to say on post update question mark dot, and then call the function. And then we're going to say toast.success, and we're going to say if retweeted, we want to check if retweeted is true. Then we're going to say retweet removed, and then otherwise we're going to say retweeted full stop, not full stop but exclamation mark. And you can do the same thing for this part right here. So you can do something like if liked is true, then we're going to say tweet liked, and then otherwise tweet unliked, just like that. And then add a space here. Okay, and then for the error, we're going to say toast.error, and we're going to say failed to retweet. Fantastic. And then next we have handle bookmark, which I'm just going to copy this, paste it down, change this into handle bookmark. Once again, checking for the current user. And then for this, we're going to change things up just a bit. Instead, we're going to say const is bookmarked is equal to await convex dot mutation dot, and then we're going to be calling the bookmark post once again, which we don't yet have. And then we're going to say set retweeted into is bookmarked, and this is not set retweeted but set bookmarked. So set bookmarked into is bookmarked, and then we're not going to be calling the on post update. Instead, we're going to say toast dot success, and we're going to check if is bookmarked is true. Then we're going to say tweet bookmarked. Otherwise, we're going to say removed from bookmarks, like so. And then for the catch block, we can remove that one. Oops. For the catch block, we're going to say failed to bookmark post. And then the next function that we need is called handle reply. So const handle reply is going to be equal to an asynchronous function. We're going to say if there's no reply content dot trim, or there's no current user, then return. And then we're going to say set reply loading to true, because then it means that there's a reply, where we're going to have our try catch block. And then inside the try block, we're going to say await convex dot mutation, and then pass in API dot post dot create post, and then we're going to pass in the author ID as the current user dot underscore ID, and then the content is going to say reply content dot trim, and then the parent ID is going to be the post dot underscore ID, and then we're going to reset everything once the reply has been sent. So set reply content back to an empty string, and then set reply open back to false, and then on post update question mark dot, and then call the function, and then toast dot success, we're going to say reply posted, like so. And then for the error, we're going to say toast dot error, and we're going to say failed to load post reply, and then this should be a semicolon. And then we're going to have a finally block here. We're going to say set reply loading back to false. And then next function that we have is called handle delete. So handle delete is going to be an asynchronous function. we're going to say if there is no current user, or there is no post.author ID, or the post.author ID is not equal to the current user dot underscore ID, then return. And then we're going to say set loading to true, and then we're going to have a try catch block. So for the try block, we're going to say await convex dot mutation, and then pass in API dot posts dot delete post, and then we're going to pass in the post ID as the post dot underscore ID, and then the user ID is going to be the current user dot underscore ID, like so. And then we're going to say toast dot success tweet deleted, and then on post update question mark dot, and then call the function, and then set delete dialog open to false. And then for the catch, we're going to say toast dot error failed to delete tweet, and then finally we're going to say set loading back to false. The next function that we're going to need is called handle share. So const handle share, this is very simple. It is an arrow function that says set share dialog open back to true, and then that is it. And then the next function is called copy link. So const copy link, this is going to be equal to an arrow function. So we're going to say const URL is equal to, pass in your backticks, and then we want to get dollar and curly brackets, we want to get the window dot location dot origin, so that it gets the domain name in this case, and then / post, because that is going to be the path for the post, and then $ post dot underscore ID to get the actual link to the tweet. And then we're going to say navigator dot clipboard dot write text. So that's how you write text to your clipboard, so that you can copy it and then pass in the URL. And then we're going to say toast dot success, and we're going to say link copied to clipboard, and then we're going to say set share dialog open back false, so that it closes everything. And then finally we want to check whether the user can delete the tweet or not. So const can delete, this is going to be dependent on the current user. So if the current user and the post dot author ID is triple equal to the current user dot underscore ID. So if this condition is met, that means that the user, the currently logged in user, is the owner of that tweet and they can delete it. And now finally we can begin to build out our return. So we're going to return a div. This div is going to be as follows. We're going to have a card inside this div, enter to auto import it. The class name for this is going to say rounded dash none, and then border dash 0, and then border dash bottom, then transition dash colors, and then we're going to have the card content, enter to auto import it, and this is going to have a class name of padding all round of 4, close it out. And then inside the card content, we're going to have a div with a class name of flex, and then space on the x of 3, space on the x of 3. And then inside this div, we're going to have a link with an href that is going to be going into a dynamic value here. So / profile $$ curly bracket, and we're going to say post.author. We want to check if that exists, and if it exists, then add the username so that we can navigate into the profile of the tweet author when you click on their link, on their profile rather. And then we're going to render out the avatar from /UI avatar. Did I import the link? No, next link. Did I import this? Okay, and this one. Okay, so the avatar here is going to have a class name of size -12, and then close that out, and then it's going to render the avatar image. The source for this, and auto import this. The source for this is going to be equal to the post.author !avatar, and then the class name is going to be object-cover, close that out. And then for the avatar fallback, for /UI avatar, we're going to be calling the get user initials functions like so, and then we want to pass in the post.author ?.need. And then below the link, we're going to have another div with a class name of min_width-0 and then flex-1. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of margin bottom of 1 and then flex and then item-center and then space on the x of 2. And then this is going to have another link with an href going into a dynamic value of profile /$ post.author ?username. And then this is going to have an h3, so this is their name. So when you click on their image or on their name, then it's going to redirect you into their profile. The h3 is going to have a class name of truncate. So if the name is long enough, it just shows an ellipsis, and then font-bold, and then text gray-900, and then on dark screens, text-white. And then the h3 is going to say post.author ?name. And then below the h3 and the link, we're going to have a span with a class name of text gray-500. And then on dark mode, we're going to say text gray-400. And then this is going to say @ and then $ curly bracket. Oh, sorry, not $ really, but curly brackets, post.author ?username. And then below this span, we're going to have another span with a class name of text gray-500. And then on dark mode, text gray-400. And then this is just simply going to say &mid dot, so it shows like a dot in the middle. Then copy this down. This is now going to have some class names here. So class name of text-sm, text gray-500, and then on dark mode, text gray-400. Why did I delete all those class names when they're basically the same? And then inside here, we're going to call the format time function, which we created. So format time, and then pass in the post.created art like so. And then below this span, we want to check whether can delete is true, and can delete is a boolean. As you can see, we're getting back a boolean, so it's either true or false. So only when can delete is true, that's when we want to have a drop-down menu for the user to be able to delete their tweet. So we're going to return a div with a class name of margin left of auto, and then inside this div, we're going to have drop-down menu. From ./UI dropdown, just make sure that you import the correct one. Once again, I'm going to CC teaser. I can't remember the word for English. So drop down menu, and then drop down menu trigger. Drop down menu trigger. This is going to have an as child prop, and then inside here, you're going to have a button with a variant of ghost, and then the size is going to be small. Then the class name is going to be size-8, and then padding all around of 0. And then this button is going to be showing the more horizontal icon from Lucid React with a class name of size-4 and then text-white, and then close that out. And then below the drop-down menu trigger, I'm going to have drop-down menu content, enter to auto-import it, align this to the end, and then we're going to have drop down menu item. Where is it? Drop down menu item, this one, and on click. So when you click on this, it's going to be calling this function that says set delete dialog open, and set this into true so that it opens the dialog. And then we're going to have a class name on this that says text red-600, and then inside here, you're going to render the trash2 icon from Lucid React, and this is going to have a class name of margin right of 2 and then size of 4, size-4, and then the text is simply going to say delete. Now we can go ahead and save that just to see what we have on the screen. So let's add a new tweet. So new tweet, and then tweet. So there we go. So it's still showing postcard, so it hadn't reloaded. And as this is loading, I'm going to end the recording session right here because it is time for the kids to come back and it's beginning to be noisy. So I'm just going to cut the video and attach it to the next part when I start recording. So see you in the next one. Okay, it is much quieter now. So let's go ahead and continue building out our postcard component. So we were able to add our delete icon, and just to confirm that it is working, the delete icon should be right here. Is it also should change this into like text gray -900 or 800, and then on dark mode we can say text white. That should make it visible on light mode. And just to make things easier a bit, because we're using next themes, then the theme is stored in local storage. So let's go into application and then local storage, and let's change this theme into dark. And yeah, that's much better. That's much better. And in fact, it's night now, so it's even easier on the eyes. So let's go ahead and continue to build this out. So we're going to go below this, after this closing, and then this div. We're going to have a link here with an href. Is this imported? Okay. So the href for this is going to be going into a dynamic link. So /post $, and then post._id. And then inside this link, we're going to have a div with a class name of margin bottom of 3 and another class name of white space -pre-wrap, and then text gray -900, and then on dark mode we're going to say text -white, and then inside here we're going to render the post.content, and then below this link we want to check for whether post.images and post.images.length is greater than 0, and when that is true, then we're going to go ahead and render out a link component with an href that goes into /post and then $post._id. And then inside here, you're going to have a div with a class name of margin bottom of 3, and then grid -columns-1, and then give it a gap of 2, and overflow-hidden, and then rounded-xl. And then inside this div, we're going to have an image component from next image, and the source for this is going to be posts.images, and then we want to get the first image in the array, and then the alt attribute, in case the image fails to load, we're just going to render post image, and then the class name for this is going to say max height -96, and then width -full, and then object -cover, and then the width for this is going to be 800, and then the height is going to be 600, and then close that out. And then after closing the image, and then below this div, we want to go ahead and say post.images.length is greater than 1. So if it is greater than 1, then we're going to go ahead and return a div with a class name of margin top of 1, text-sm, text-gray-500, and then on dark mode, text gray-400, then close that out. And then we're going to render out the plus. So this is to show how many images are in the uploaded images or in the post. So plus, and then we're going to say post.images.length -1, and then the text is going to say more, but then if it is one image, then we want to say plus one more image, and if it is more than one image, we want to say plus 2 more images or plus 3 more images. So the way that we do that is we're going to say we want to check the post.images.length if it is greater than 2, and if it is so, then I want to return the text that says images, and then otherwise we would just want to say image, like so. And then now we're going to go below this link, below this, and we're going to create another div with the class name of flex and max width -md, and then items-center, and then justify-between. And then inside here, we're going to have a button with the variant of ghost, and then the size is going to be small, so size is equal to small, and then on click, we're going to call set reply open, and set it to the opposite of reply open. So if it is true, then set it to false. If it is false, then set it to true. Now the button is going to have some class names here. So class name is equal to text-gray-500, and then on hover, we're going to say bg-blue-50, and then on hover, we're going to say text blue-500, and then on dark mode, when you hover over it, we're going to say bg-blue-900 with an opacity of 20, and then close that out. And then inside the button, we're going to render out the message circle icon from Lucid React. The class name is going to be margin right of 2 and then size of 5, and then close that out. And then below this, we're going to render the post.replies count, or 0. Now below this button, we are going to have another button, and I'm just going to copy this because it's going to be easier. So let's go ahead and save that actually, so that we can it is formatted better. So this is going to be a variant of ghost, and then size is this, and then the button is now going to call the function called handle retweet, and then it is going to say text gray 500. And you know what, these class names are dynamic, so let's just go ahead and let's do this. Let's grab all of these class names inside here, cut it out, and then add our curly brackets, and then paste in the classes. So text gray 500 hover bg green. This is now bg green 50, and then on hover text green 500, and then dark mode hover text or rather bg green 900/20. And then we want to check if, so $ curly bracket, if it has been retweeted. If that is true, then we want to apply the class name called text green -500, and otherwise we want to apply no class name. So it's going to be that, and then the icon is going to say repeat 2. The class names are going to remain the same, and then the text is going to say post.retweets count or 0. And then copy this button one more time. So the on click for this is going to call handle like, and then the text is going to say text gray 500, and then on hover, so this is going to say red, so all of these are going to say red. And what I've done there is just highlighted this text and then Control D, Control D, Control D, so that I can change all of them at the same time. So all of those classes are going to be red, and this is now going to say liked. If it is liked, then that is going to apply, and then this is now going to say post.likes count. And then the class names for this are also going to be dynamic, and it's going to be showing the heart icon. So heart icon from Lucid React. The class name for this is going to be dynamic, so margin right of 2 and then size of 5. And then we want to check if liked is true, and if it is true, then we want to apply the fill current class, and then otherwise we want to apply no class. And then once we have that, then we're going to have a drop down menu. So drop down menu, and then drop down menu trigger. This is going to have as child, and then inside here we're going to have a button with a variant of ghost, and then the size is going to be small, and then the class name is going to say text gray -500, and then on hover bg blue -50, and then on hover text blue -500, and then on dark mode, when you hover over it, we're going to say text blue -900 with an opacity of 20. And then inside this button, we're going to have the share icon from Lucid React with a class name of size -5, and then close that out. And then below the drop down menu trigger, we're going to have the drop down menu content, and this is going to have a class name of border, and then border gray -800, and then bg gray, and then bg gray -950, and then text white like so. And I think this should apply on dark mode classes, and we're going to see how it looks on light mode. We're going to correct it, but inside this we're going to have drop down menu item. So drop down menu item, when you click on this, we're going to be calling the function called handle bookmark, and then inside here we're going to render out the bookmark icon from Lucid React. It's going to have a class name here which is dynamic, so margin right of 2, size of 4, and then when bookmarked is true, we're going to apply fill -current, otherwise we're going to apply no styles, and then close this out. And then below this we're going to show bookmarked. So if bookmarked is true, then we're going to say remove bookmark, and then otherwise we're going to say add bookmark. And then below the drop down menu item, we're going to have another drop down menu item. When you click on this, we're going to be calling the function called handle share, and then this is going to be showing the share icon from Lucid React. The class name for this is going to be margin right of 2 and then size of 4, and then the text is going to say share tweet. So you can save that, and then on the screen we should be able to see this is not defined. Repeat to is right here. Control spacebar and then enter. Confirm the heart is there, and then the share icon is also there. Fantastic. So save that. Okay, so you can see that we're getting some errors, and that is because we don't have the convex functions. But what we are building is this right here. So you can see that if I click on the retweet, then it says fail to retweet once again because we don't have that function, but we have the icons showing up right here. So next, let's go below the drop down menu and then below this first div, and then we're going to create our reply form. So we're going to check if reply open is true, and only when it is true, that's when we're going to render out this div, which will have a class name of margin top of 4 and then border dash top, and then padding top of 4 as well, and close it out. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with the class name of flex and then space on the x of 3, and then this is going to be showing the avatar, so avatar component, which is going to have a class name of size dash 10, and then close it out. And then we're going to have avatar image, and the source for this is going to be the current user (avatar), and then we're going to give it a class name of object dash cover, and then below this we're going to render out the avatar fallback, and the avatar fallback is going to be calling the get user initials function, and then we're going to pass in current user (name). Now below the avatar, we're going to render out another div with the class name of flex-1, and then inside this div we're going to have a text area component, and the text area is going to have a placeholder here that says tweet your reply, and then the value is going to say reply content, and then on change we're going to call e, where we're going to say set reply content into e.target.value, and then the class name for this class name is equal to resize-none, then border-none, and then placeholder-gray-500. Then on focus we want ring-0, like so, and then the number of rows is going to be 2, and then max length of the tweet is going to be 280 characters. And then below this text area we're going to have a div with a class name of margin top of 2, and then flex, and then items dash center, and then justify dash between, and then inside this div we're going to have another div with a class name of text dash sm, and then text gray dash 500, and then inside this div we're going to render 280 minus reply content dot length, so that we get the number of characters left. And then below this div we're going to have another div with the class name of space on the x of 2, and then inside here we're going to have a button with a variant of ghost with the size of small, and then on click we're going to be calling the set reply open, so set reply open and set it to false, and then the text is going to say cancel, and then we're going to copy this button down. This next one is going to have a variant of default, the size is going to be small, and then on click we're going to be calling the handle reply, so handle reply, and then the disabled state is going to be checking for if there is no reply content.trim or there is reply loading, and then it's going to have some class names here, so class name is equal to bgblue-500, and then on hover we're going to say bgblue-600, and then the text is going to be checking for reply loading. If this is true, then the text is going to say replying ... otherwise it's going to say replied. So we can save that. Let's see whether we can test anything out. So let's see, when I click this, it gives me the drop down that says delete, so that is working correctly. And when I click this, it gives me the drop down that says add bookmark. So this is the wrong color. So where do we have the share icon? Share icon should be here, handle share, share tweet, add bookmark, and then share tweet. So here, this is on hover, and then on dark mode hover. So you need to have the dark mode, and then hover class bg-gray-800. Save that, so that now when you hover over this, then the class name is going to be gray 800. I think that's better. And then on hover, on dark hover, the text is going to say, let's just change it into text-white. I think that should work correctly. And then we're going to go all the way to the bottom of this, and we want to go ahead and create the delete dialog. So inside here, we're going to render out the dialog component, but you'll notice that we're getting an error because we can only return one parent element in a single return statement. So what I'm going to do is right at the top where our return begins, right here, I'm going to shrink this down and then cut all of this out and place it inside another div. And when I do that, then I can paste in the rest of the application, so that now on the dialog is going to have a prop called open, which is going to be calling the delete dialog open. And then on open change, we're going to be calling the set delete dialog open. And then inside the dialog, make sure that you auto import it once again from /UI dialog. We're going to go ahead and add in the dialog content, import it. This is going to have a class name of border, and then border gray-800, then bg gray-900, and those are class names for dark mode. And then inside the dialog content, we're going to have the dialog header, and inside the dialog header, we're going to have dialog title, which is going to say delete tweet. And then below the dialog title, we're going to have dialog description from /UI dialog. Once again, just confirm that you have imported these. So for the dialog description, we're going to give it a class name of text-white with an opacity of 80. And then the text is going to say, this action cannot be undone. It will remove the tweet from your profile, the timeline of any accounts that you follow, and from any search results. And then below the dialog header, we're going to have the dialog footer component. And inside the dialog footer, we're going to have a button with the variant of ghost. And then on click, we're going to be calling the set delete dialog open back to false. And then the text is going to say cancel. And then below this button, we're going to have another button. So we're going to have another button here with the variant of destructive. And then on click, we're going to be calling the handle delete function. And then disabled state is going to be equal to loading. And then inside here, we're going to check if loading is true, then the text is going to say deleting ... Otherwise, we're going to say delete. And then that is going to be for the first dialog. And then for the share dialog, we're going to go below this dialog. We're going to create another dialog with an open here. And you know what? Let's just copy this entire dialog because, I mean, no point in typing all of that out again. So dialog. So this is now going to call share dialog open. And then set share dialog open. The dialog content is going to be like that. And then the dialog header now is going to say share tweet, the dialog title, I mean. And then we're not going to have the dialog description here. But below the dialog header, we're going to have a div with a class name of space-y-4. And then inside here, we're going to render out another div with a class name of rounded-large, then border, and then border-gray-800 with padding all round of 4. And then another div inside this with margin bottom of 2, then flex, and then items-center, and then space on the x of 3. And then inside here, we're going to render out the avatar component, which we have already done somewhere. So let's just go ahead and copy paste it. So this avatar component all the way to the bottom, we're going to paste it inside here. Now this is going to render out the avatar. The size is going to be 8. And then the avatar image post.author.avatar, that is correct. And the class name, and then avatar fallback post.author.name, that looks okay. And then below the avatar component, we're going to have another div. And inside this div, we're going to have a paragraph with the class name of font-medium, font-medium. And then the text is going to say post.author !name. And then below this, we can paste down the paragraph. This is now going to say text-sm and text-gray-500. And then this is going to say post.author.username. And we're going to render out the @ symbol at the beginning like so. And then I can go below this div, and then below this div, and then we're going to have a paragraph here with the class name of text-sm that says post.content. So post.content, and then close out this div. And then now below this div, we're going to have another div with the class name of flex, and then space on the x of 2. And then inside here, we're going to have a button. So basically a button like this, cut it out and paste it here. This is going to be a variant of default. And then on click, we're going to be calling the copy link. So copy link function. And then the class name for this button is going to say flex-1. And then inside here, we're going to be rendering out the copy icon. So Control Spacebar, import it from Lucid React. The class name here is going to say margin right of 2, and then size-4. And then the text is going to say copy link. And then let's copy this button. Where's the button? Oh, it's misaligned. So we're going to have another button here with the variant of ghost. When you click on this, we're going to be calling an inline function here where we're going to say window.open. And we want to open up into /post $post._id. And then you want this to open up on a blank page. So you can add a comma and then _blank. And then now the class names here are going to be flex1 and then border-gray-800. And then this icon is now going to render the external link from Lucid React. The class names are going to remain the same, and then the text is going to say open. And that should be the dialog. So now I can remove the dialog footer. We don't need it anymore. So if I save that, then we should be able to test out whether this is working. But once again, remember that we don't have our functions. So that's what we are actually going to do next. We're going to be creating our functions from convents. But now look at this. If I click on the share here, I can say share tweet, and it opens this up. So it shows the owner of the tweet, it shows the content of the tweet, and then you can copy the link. So if I copy the link, you see it says copy to clipboard. I can open it up on a new page, and look at this. It copies the localhost depending on the top level domain. And then you want to open it into /post and then the ID of that particular tweet. And we're going to be building out this page so that when you paste this in, it's going to take you to the actual tweet. And then if I say add bookmark, then fail to add bookmark because we don't have that function just yet. So let's go ahead and fix some stuff, because there's some bit of UI that is happening here that is not pleasing. So for example, this should not be behaving like that on the sidebar, and then this on the sidebar as well should not be behaving like that. And I just remembered to show you this, that you can filter between for you and following. So it's already working. I mean, most of it is working. The reason why this is not working is because we don't have the functions once again. So we're going to be able to fix that. So right away, let's jump into the sidebar. Let's find out where our navbar items are, navigation items. And then in our navigation items, we have a hover. So when you hover over this, we are saying this, but on dark mode hover, we don't have the dark mode color. So on dark mode, on hover, we're going to say BG gray-900, which is going to fix the hover for this one. And which means therefore that this should now go into text white, so that now you can read the text when you hover over it. And you know what? This should be BG gray-800. And there we go. So that looks much better. And not even gray. What am I doing? BG blue. Okay, that is not the color that he wanted. Let's just use gray-800. And I'm now coming down with the flu. I wonder why. And then let's find the profile. So for the profile, let's just search for profile. So the profile should be somewhere. So we have post here. So it should be below that. So right here is where it is. So let's find where this is the avatar, but where is this coming from? The kind of background that it has. BG Gray 800. Remove that. And then we also need to remove the hover state for it. I mean, let's see. What class did I remove? Dark BG Gray 800. I mean, it's annoying to try to look for it right now. So let's just go ahead. Let me just ignore it for now. But in case you find why this is happening, you can go ahead and fix it. But now let's go ahead and we need to create the convex functions. So we need to create, let me find where API is. So API is here. We need to create the post is, post liked, is retweeted, is bookmarked, and then the like post, and then retweet post, and then bookmark post, and then create post is already there. So we don't need to do that again, and then delete post. So quite a few functions that we need to go ahead and do. So what I'm going to do therefore is I'm just going to open this on the right, drag and drop it on the right, and then I'm going to navigate into convex and then posts. Oh, we don't have posts. Oh no, right here, there it is. So posts, and then grab this and place it here, so that now I know the functions that I need instead of having to jump back and forth between the files. So we already have create post here. So let's go ahead and right below this, let me see something. Okay, yeah. So you can go right below this, right below the, or rather above the get for you post. We can say export const is post liked. So is post liked is going to be equal to a query, and it's going to be taking in some arguments inside here. So it's going to take the user ID as v.id and then passing users from the users table, and then post ID is going to be v.id coming from the posts table, and then it's going to have a handler function here, which is an asynchronous function that takes in the context as well as the arguments, and then we're going to say const like is equal to await context.db.query. You want to query the likes table, you want to query it with index of by user post, and then inside here we're going to pass in q as a callback function. We're going to say q.equals the user ID and compare it with the arguments.user ID, and then we want to check if this is also equal to the post ID and compare it with the arguments.post ID. And then once we do that, then we want to get the first tweet that matches. And then what we're going to do is return not like, which means it is going to return a Boolean version. So it's going to return the Boolean, so it is either true or false. So we can save that. And then the next function that we need is retweeted. And you know what? This is not is retweeted, this is post retweeted. And then this is post bookmarked. And then now below this, we can go ahead and say export const is post retweeted. This is going to be equal to a query, which are going to have some arguments, and the arguments are the same as these ones on top. So copy and paste it. And then for the handler, we're going to call the asynchronous function context, and then arguments, and then we're going to say const bookmark is equal to await context.db.query, and we're querying the bookmarks table with the index of by user post, and then we're going to pass in a callback function here, and then we're going to say query.equals and then we're going to pass in the user ID, and then arguments dot user ID, and then we want to say dot equals once again post ID, and then arguments dot post ID, and then get the first one that matches, and then we're going to say return not bookmark, like so. So that is how you check whether okay. I've just realized what I've done. This is for is post bookmarked. I mean, I didn't even notice it when I said bookmark here, but that's okay. So now we can simply copy this, paste it on top, and we can change this into is post retweeted, because it is fairly the same thing. So now instead of, it's going to take in the arguments, but instead of bookmark, we're going to say retweeted or retweet, and then we're checking the retweets table, retweets, and then we are searching by user post and then user ID. That is correct, and then this is now going to return retweet, like so. So let me check this. So we have the post liked, is retweeted, is post bookmarked. So next we need to have the like post. So like post, I'm going to place it on top. So right here, so export const like post. So like post is going to be equal to a mutation, which takes in the user ID. So copy this because they're similar. And wait a minute, let's copy even the arguments, the whole thing. And then we're going to have the handler function here, which is asynchronous, passing the context and then the arguments. And then we're going to say, we want to check first of all if the post has already been liked. So we're going to say const existing like is equal to await context.db.query, and we are querying the likes table, and we're querying it with index of by user post. So by user post. And then we're adding our callback function here. We're going to say query.equals, and we want to search the post ID and then compare it with the arguments.post ID, and then dot first. So dot first, and then we're going to say if there's an existing like, then what we want to do is unlike it. So how do we unlike it? We're going to say await context.db.delete, so deleting the like, so existing like dot underscore ID, and then we're going to say const post is equal to await context.db.get and arguments.post ID, and then I want to check if the post is there. So if post, then await context.db.patch arguments.post ID, and then open up an object here that says likes count, and we're going to say math.max, and then pass in the post.likes count or 0 minus 1 and then comma 0. And then we're going to go outside of this if, but we're going to be within this if because we're going to have an else statement here, because now we have unliked the tweet. So if that is an existing like, so if there's no existing like, then we want to like the tweet. So I'm going to say await context.db.insert into the likes table, and we are inserting, or rather inserting, the user ID as arguments.user ID, and then the post ID is going to say arguments.post ID, and then the created at is going to say date.now. And then below this, we're going to say const post is equal to await context.db.get the arguments.post ID, and then we're going to say that if the post exists, then we're going to say await context.db.patch and pass in the arguments.post ID, comma, and then likes count. We're going to set it into the post.likes count or 0, and then add 1 to it, like so. And then once the user likes the post, what we're going to do is create a notification for it. So if post.author ID is not equal to the arguments.user ID, then we're going to say await context.db.insert into the notifications table, and then we're going to insert the user ID as post.author ID, and then the type of notification is a like, and then from user ID, so from user ID is going to be the arguments.user ID, and then the post ID is going to be arguments.post ID, and then created at is going to say date.now, and then whether it has been read or not is going to say false. And that is the entire function complete for the liking post. Now, which is the next one we need to create? Retweet post. So retweet post is going to be as follows. We're going to go below this and we're going to say export const retweet post is going to be a mutation where we're going to have the arguments. So let me copy this because it's the same thing. And then the handler is going to say it's going to be an asynchronous function as always. Then context arguments, where we're going to say we want to check if it has already been retweeted. So const existing retweet is equal to await context.db.query, and we're querying the retweets table with index of by user post. And then we're going to have our callback function here. We're going to say query.equals and pass in the user ID, compare it with the arguments.user ID. And then once again, dot equals the post ID and compare it to the arguments.post ID, and then get the first one that matches. So if there is an existing retweet, then we want to unretweet it. So just like we did for the liking above. So we're going to say await context.db.delete. We are deleting the existing retweet._id. And then we're going to say const post is equal to await context.db.get the arguments.post ID. And then we're going to say that if the post exists, then await context.db.patch, and we're going to say arguments.post ID, and then comma, and then open up your curly brackets. Retweets count is going to be math.max, and we want to pass in the post.retweets count or 0, and then -1, and then comma 0. And then right here we're going to have our else statement, and the else is going to be now to trigger the retweet. So I'm going to say await context.db.insert, and we are inserting into the retweets table, where we're going to say the user ID is arguments.user ID, and then the post ID is arguments.post ID, and then created at is going to be date.now, like so, looking nice. And then below this we're going to say const post is equal to await context.db.get the arguments.post ID, and then if the post exists, then await context.db.patch, and we pass in the arguments.post ID, open up your curly brackets. The retweets count is now going to say post.retweets count, or it's going to say 0 and then add 1 to it. So add 1 to the existing retweets, or if it is 0, then add 1 to it. And then once we do that, then we need to create the notification for it. So we're going to say if post.author ID is not equal to the arguments.user ID, then we're going to go ahead and say await context.db.insert into the notifications table, and we are inserting the user ID as the arguments.author ID, post.author ID, and then the type is going to be a retweet, and then from user ID is arguments.user ID, and then post ID is arguments.post ID, and then created at is date.now, and then whether it is read or not is going to be false. And that is it. So let's save that, and let's see what is the next function that we need. We have the retweet post. That's what we called it, right? Retweet post. Okay, just confirming that the names are the same. So next is bookmark post. So below retweet post, let's go ahead and create bookmark post. So we're going to say export const bookmark post. This is going to be equal to a mutation, and the mutation is going to be as follows. Copy this because they're the same. And then for the handler is an asynchronous function calling the context and the arguments. And then once again, we want to check if it has already been bookmarked. So because it's easier, let me just copy this, and we need the existing bookmark as well. So let me just copy this, paste it here, and change this into existing bookmark. And inside here, we are querying the bookmarks table. So bookmarks, is that what I call it? Yes. And then by user post, where we are checking for the user ID and we're checking for the post IDs. Yeah, that is correct. And then below this, we're going to say if existing bookmark, then we want to remove the bookmark. So await context.db.delete, and we want to delete the existing bookmark ._id, and then we want to return false. And then else, we're going to add the bookmark. So await context.db.insert into the bookmarks, and we're going to say this, the user ID is going to be arguments.user ID, and then the post ID is going to say arguments.post ID, and then created at is going to say date.now, like so. And then below this, we're going to say return true, like so. This should be a comma. Fantastic, that is our function. And then let me check if we are missing any. So bookmark post, let's check. So we have create post, and now we need to create the delete post. Now for the delete, I'm going to set the delete all the way as the last one. So delete here. So export const delete post. So this is going to be a mutation, and we're going to be taking the arguments here. The user ID is v.id. User ID is v.id coming from the users table, and then the post ID is v.id coming from the posts table. And then the handler here, the handler is as always an asynchronous function taking the context and the arguments, and inside you're going to say const post is equal to await context.db.get, and then we're going to pass in the arguments.post ID, arguments.post ID, and then we want to check if there is no post, then we're going to say throw new error, we're going to say post not found. And then if there's a post, then we want to go ahead and delete the post. So we're going to say if post.author_id is not equal to the arguments.user_id, it means you are not the owner of that post. So we're going to say throw new error, and the text is going to say you can only delete your own posts. So, and then now we can go ahead with the actual deleting of the post. So we're going to say we're going to say await context.db.delete, and we want to delete the arguments.post ID, like so. And then we need to update the number of posts on your profile. So we're going to say const user is equal to await context.db.get, and then pass in the arguments.user ID, and then we're going to say await context.db.patch, and we're patching the arguments.user ID, comma, and then we're going to add the posts count. So post count is going to say math.max, and this should be patched with an H. So math.max, and then check whether the user posts count or return 0 and then -1 and then comma 0. Go, much better. And then we want to check if it was a reply, and if it was a reply, then we want to update the number of replies on the original tweet. So I'm going to say if post.parent ID, if that is true, then const parent post is equal to await context.db.get the post.parent id, and then if parent post, if that is true, then await context.db.patch, and you want to patch the post.parent id, comma, and then you want to update the replies count. Set that into math.max like so, where we're going to pass in the parent post.replies count, or 0, and then minus 1, 0 like so. And that should be it for that particular one. This should be a comma, not a semicolon. Save that, and then let's see if we need any other. So delete post, and yeah, I think we are done. So now let's go ahead and try to retweet, or rather to tweet, and let's make sure that this is all working as we expect it to work. Okay, so we're still getting an error here that says error checking interactions. So let's find out where this was. Oh, we need to save this first of all. Then let's search for error checking interactions. This was in the postcard. Why is it happening? It's happening because something is failing here. If there's no current user, where is current user coming from? Current user is coming from this. So postcard is in the post list. Yes, current user, and post list is inside the, where's the original thingy? Should be inside the app, and then home, and then page. So post list, so current user is user. So where is this user? The user should be coming from kind user. Okay, so that should be okay. I think I just needed to reload it, right? So let's reload it once again to ensure that we're not getting any errors on the screen. Okay, there we go. So we are not getting any errors, looking very, very nice. So let's go ahead and try to add a reply here. So reply gets an issue. What's the issue? Class name in avatar. So this should be inside the replies. So postcard, let's search for class name. It is a small letter. We want to match the case. So class name right here. Fix that in class name, save it. So we should no longer have that error. So tweet a reply. So this is a reply to the tweet. And then you can say reply. There we go. So reply is posted. And then now, if I were to click on this, we don't have this page yet, so you're going to get a 404 error. But if we were to go ahead and click on this, you now see that the replies count has been updated. And then if I try to retweet, you can see that now the retweet is added. And if I like, it is also added. Okay, so failed to like post. So let's go into the postcard, and then let's go ahead and search for failed to like post. So this is happening here. So why is it happening? So handle like is here, asynchronous. Handle like is also being called there. Okay. So if no current user is done, so await convex mutation api.posts.like post. What did I call this? .post dot what? Like post. Okay. Takes in the user ID and then the post ID. Set liked into the opposite. Okay, so I'm not immediately saying where the error is, but let's try to hurt it again and then open this up so that you can see it says try to query index likes by user post, but the query didn't use the index fields in order. Oh, okay, I see what this is. So let's go into post. Let's search for like posts. So it says that it needs to get the index. It needs to search for the post ID first, and then the user ID. Save that, and then let's go ahead and try it again. So reload. So let's try to like it again, and still the same issue. What is this? Oh, it was still loading. No. So let's bring this down so that the user ID is first and then post ID. and then we're checking for existing like. So existing like, okay, I see the problem. This, let's just rewrite this entire thing from with index. So with index, and we want to index it by user post, and then pass in the query here. So query.equals, and then pass in the user ID first of all, and then compare it with the arguments.user ID, and then dot equals again. That's the part we didn't have. So post ID, and then arguments.post ID, and then dot first, like so. That should now be the correct thing. So save that, and then let's retry it again. So let's try to like it again, and there we go. So tweet unliked, tweet liked, tweet unliked. That's not true. It should be the opposite. It should be the opposite. So this should say not liked, not liked, not one. So not liked. Save that. Come on. Okay. So that now when I click on this, once it reloads, tweet liked and then tweet unliked. Yeah, that's better. And then on the bookmark, we can say add bookmark. So tweet bookmarked, and then share tweet, we can copy link, and so on and so forth. So just to verify that everything is working, if you go into your complex backend, then we should be able to see what we have been doing. So let me add the like here, and then we already have the bookmark, so it says remove bookmark, as you can see. So if I go into the likes table, I should be able to see the likes right there. And if I go into the bookmarks, I should be able to see the bookmarks. Look at that. So that basically means that our bookmarks page is almost done, because now we just need to get the bookmarks and then display them to the user. And if I check the notifications, I think we should also have something. Okay, we don't yet have anything, but we're going to be able to deal with that. Very, very nice. So I think with that, we are finally done with the home page. And so the next page that we're going to be dealing with is the explore page.